The bullet that took Yates Ingram's son also stole the light from 3 pairs of young eyes, and as he stood over the fresh grave in Lone Pine, California, that scorching August day in 1878, he wondered how a man could possibly fill a void that enormous. His daughter-in-law had died bringing their youngest into the world just 8 months prior, and now Thomas lay beneath 6 feet of unforgiving earth, victim to a stray shot during a saloon dispute that had nothing to do with him. At 36 years old, Yates had imagined growing old alongside his only child, watching him raise these babies, but God apparently had different plans. Now he had 3 grandchildren under the age of 7 looking to him for everything, and he barely knew how to brush a little girl's hair. The oldest, Michael, stood rigid beside him, trying so hard to be brave at 6 years old. 4-year-old Samuel clung to Yates's leg, his small body shaking with sobs he tried to muffle. And little Catherine, barely walking at 15 months, sat in the dust playing with a rock, too young to understand her daddy wasn't coming home. Yates felt his throat constrict as he placed his weathered hand on Michael's thin shoulder. The boy didn't cry, just stared at that mound of dirt with eyes too old for his face. "We should head back," Yates said quietly, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. He owned a modest ranch 3 miles outside town, nothing fancy but enough to keep cattle and horses. Thomas had worked it alongside him, had been learning the business, had been so damn good at it. Now the work would fall solely on Yates's shoulders while he figured out how to raise children he barely knew. Thomas and his wife had lived in a small house on the property, close enough to visit but far enough to have their own life. Yates had been the doting grandfather who showed up with peppermints and stories, not the man who dealt with scraped knees and nightmares and whatever else children needed. He scooped Catherine into one arm and took Samuel's hand with the other. Michael walked ahead, his small back straight, his Sunday clothes already dusty from the dry California wind that never seemed to stop blowing through the Owens Valley. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed to the west, majestic and indifferent to human suffering. Yates had always loved this land, the way it stretched wild and endless, but today it felt crushing in its vastness. The ranch house was quiet when they returned. Neighbors had brought food, as neighbors did, and it sat on the kitchen table covered with cloths. Yates had no appetite and suspected the children didn't either, but they needed to eat. He tried to get something into them, managed a few bites of bread and some milk before Samuel started crying again and Catherine grew fussy. Michael still hadn't shed a tear, and that worried Yates more than the crying. That first night was endless. Catherine wailed for her mother, a woman she'd barely known but whose absence she felt. Samuel had nightmares and woke screaming. Michael lay silent in his bed, staring at the ceiling when Yates checked on him. By dawn, Yates felt like he'd aged a decade. He had cattle to tend, horses to feed, a ranch to run, and 3 traumatized children who needed more than he knew how to give. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and grief. Yates did his best, truly he did, but he was drowning. Catherine needed constant attention. Samuel clung to him every moment, terrified to let him out of sight, and Michael had grown so quiet, so withdrawn, that Yates feared losing him to some dark place inside himself. The ranch work suffered. Yates couldn't ride out to check the far pastures when he had a baby to watch. He couldn't fix fences when Samuel panicked if left alone. He hired a hand to help with the cattle, an older man named George who'd worked spreads throughout California, but that didn't solve the problem of 3 children who desperately needed more than a grieving grandfather could provide. It was 3 weeks after the funeral when Yates made the trip into Lone Pine for supplies. He'd brought all 3 children because he couldn't leave them. though he knew it would make shopping more difficult. Samuel held his hand while Michael walked beside them with Catherine balanced on his small hip. The boy shouldn't have to carry his sister, but he'd insisted, taking on responsibilities far beyond his years. The general store was busy that morning. Yates nodded to familiar faces, saw the pity in their eyes, and hated it. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted his son back. He wanted these children to have their father. Since neither was possible, he just wanted to get through each day without completely failing them. He was examining a bag of flour when he heard the raised voice near the front counter. "I have money," a woman said firmly. "I can pay for what I need." "Now, Mrs. Hayes, you know I extended credit to your husband before he passed," the shopkeeper replied, his tone condescending. But that was different. A woman alone can't be expected to manage a farm. You should sell while you can still get something for it and move back east where you have family. "I have no family back east," the woman replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "My family is here. My daughter is buried here. And I'm not selling my land to you or anyone else, Mr. Peterson. I just need supplies which I'm prepared to pay for. Either you'll sell them to me or I'll take my business elsewhere." Yates glanced over, curious despite himself. He saw a slender woman in a faded calico dress, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was pale but determined, her jaw set in a way that suggested she'd had this conversation before and was thoroughly tired of it. Beside her stood a boy of perhaps 8 or 9, and behind him were 2 girls, maybe 6 and 4, both with the same dark hair as their mother. "There isn't anywhere else," Peterson said smugly. "And a woman farming 40 acres alone is just foolishness. Be reasonable." "What I'm being is a customer," the woman said. "Will you take my money or not?" Yates found himself moving forward before he'd fully decided to intervene. "Peterson, just sell the lady what she needs. We all have work to get back to." The shopkeeper's face reddened. "This isn't your concern, Ingram. It is if you're holding up the line with unnecessary conversation," Yates replied evenly. He looked at the woman and nodded. "Madam." She studied him for a moment, her green eyes assessing, then nodded back. "Thank you, but I can handle this." "Didn't mean to suggest otherwise," Yates said. "Just pointing out that a customer's money spends the same regardless of their circumstances." Peterson huffed, but began gathering the items on the woman's list with ill grace. She paid from a small purse, counting out coins carefully. Her children stood quietly behind her, well-behaved but watchful. The older boy had a protective air about him that Yates recognized from Michael. Too young to be the man of the family, but trying anyway. As she collected her purchases, Yates noticed how heavy the sack of flour was, how she struggled to balance it with her other items. Her son tried to help, but he was too small to carry much. Without thinking, Yates stepped forward again. "Let me help you load that," he offered. "Got my wagon right outside." She hesitated, pride warring with practicality, then nodded. "Thank you. That's kind." Outside, the late September sun beat down mercilessly. Yates loaded her supplies into a battered farm wagon while his grandchildren watched curiously. Her children watched too, and he saw the younger girl edge closer to Catherine. "Pretty baby," she whispered. "This is Catherine," Michael said quietly. "She's my sister." The woman secured the last of her supplies and turned to Yates. "I appreciate your help, Mr. Ingram." "That's your name, isn't it?" "Yates Ingram, madam. Ranch about 3 miles north." "Hannah Hayes," she replied. "My farm is about 2 miles east near the base of the hills." She paused, then added, "I heard about your son. I'm very sorry." Yates nodded stiffly. "Heard about your husband, too." "And your daughter. That must be hard." Something flickered in her eyes, a deep well of pain that matched his own. "Yes," she said simply. Then she looked at his grandchildren, understanding dawning. "These are his children." "Yes, madam, Michael, Samuel, and Catherine. I'm doing my best with them." Hannah's expression softened. "I can see that. They look well cared for," she called to her own children. "James, Margaret, Lily, time to go." They climbed into the wagon with practiced ease, and Hannah pulled herself up onto the seat with a grace born of necessity. She nodded to Yates once more, then clicked to her horses and rolled away down the dusty street. Yates watched her go, thinking about a woman trying to work a farm alone with 3 children. It wasn't uncommon out here, widows struggling to hold on to land, but that didn't make it any easier. At least he had the ranch and some savings. At least he knew the work. She was probably learning as she went, fighting men like Peterson who wanted to take advantage, dealing with grief while trying to keep her family afloat. It made his own struggles feel slightly less isolating. The following weeks brought the first hints of autumn, cooler nights if not cooler days. Yates settled into a routine of sorts with the children, though it felt less like succeeding and more like barely surviving. Catherine was walking more steadily now, which meant she could get into trouble faster. Samuel's nightmares continued, leaving them both exhausted. Michael remained quiet, obedient, distant. Then one afternoon, George came riding in from the eastern pasture with news. "Got some cattle mixed in with yours," he reported. "Brand I don't recognize, and they've pushed through a fence line. Looks like they came from that direction." He pointed east toward where Hannah Hayes's farm lay. Yates sighed. This happened sometimes, animals wandering, fences breaking. It needed addressing but wasn't exactly urgent. Still, he should ride over and let her know. Maybe help fix the fence. It was the neighborly thing to do. The next morning, he loaded all 3 children into the wagon and headed east. He couldn't leave them alone, and bringing them was better than worrying. The ride took about 40 minutes across scrubland dotted with sage and rabbit brush. The Hayes farm came into view gradually. A small house with a barn and several outbuildings, fields that had been planted but showed signs of struggle. Hannah emerged from the house as he drove up, shading her eyes against the sun. She wore work clothes, canvas pants that had probably belonged to her husband, and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Her hair was in a long braid down her back, and there was dirt on her hands. "Mr. Ingram," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Is something wrong?" Yates climbed down from the wagon. "Got some of your cattle mixed in with mine. Fence is down on the eastern boundary. Thought I should let you know, and I can help fix it if you need." Relief and gratitude crossed her face. "I would appreciate that. I've been trying to keep up with fencing, but there's so much of it, and I'm still learning." "Where's your cattle now?" Yates asked. "In the near pasture. I sold most of what my husband had because I couldn't manage them all, kept just 10 head, enough for milk and meat." It made sense, though it also meant less income. Yates nodded toward his grandchildren who were climbing out of the wagon. "Hope you don't mind I brought them. Can't really leave them alone." "Of course not," Hannah said. "My 3 are around back, helping with the chickens. They can all play together while we work." She called her children, and within minutes, all 6 were cautiously getting acquainted. James, Hannah's oldest at 9, immediately took charge, organizing a game that involved a ball and a lot of running. Michael seemed hesitant at first but gradually joined in. Even Samuel stopped clinging to Yates long enough to chase after the others. Catherine and Lily, the youngest girls, sat in the shade with Margaret watching over them. "They needed this," Hannah said softly, watching them play. "Haven't seen James smile in weeks." "Same with Michael," Yates admitted. "He's been holding everything inside." They rode out to check the fence line together, leaving the older children in charge with strict instructions to stay within sight of the house. The break in the fence was significant, several posts down and wire tangled. Hannah looked at it with obvious dismay. "I should have found this sooner," she said. "This much damage didn't happen yesterday," Yates replied, examining the posts. "This has been going for a while. Ground's been dry, posts worked loose." They worked together for the next several hours, digging new post holes, setting posts, stretching wire. Hannah was stronger than she looked and didn't shy away from hard work, but Yates could see the fatigue in her face. She was running herself ragged trying to do everything. "How are you managing?" he asked as they finished securing the last section. Hannah wiped sweat from her forehead. "Honestly, barely. The cattle I can handle mostly. The fields are harder. I got the wheat planted late and the yield was poor. I have chickens, a vegetable garden, but—" She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "We'll make it through, we have to. You have help. Someone to assist with the heavy work. Can't afford to hire anyone," she admitted. "I'm making do." They rode back to the house in contemplative silence. The children were still playing, their laughter carrying across the dry ground. It was the most animated Yates had seen his grandchildren since the funeral. Catherine was actually giggling, chasing after Lily in toddling steps. Hannah noticed too. "They're good for each other," she observed. "Seems that way," Yates agreed. She invited them in for water and something to eat. Her house was neat but sparse, everything worn and mended multiple times. There were faded curtains at the windows, a table with mismatched chairs, evidence of a life being held together through sheer determination. But there were also careful touches: wildflowers in a jar, children's drawings tacked to the wall, a sampler that read "Home Sweet Home" in careful stitching. Hannah set out bread and butter, some cheese, water from the well. The children ate hungrily, talking and laughing together. Yates and Hannah sat at the table, making small talk that gradually became easier. "Your husband farmed?" Yates asked. "Yes." Martin was good at it, had learned from his father back in Missouri. "We came out here 4 years ago looking for land of our own. Got 40 acres for a good price because it needs so much work." She paused, her fingers tracing the grain of the table. "We were happy. It was hard, but we were building something." "What happened to him?" "Farming accident. The plow blade caught on a rock and the whole thing flipped. He was underneath." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were distant. "That was 5 months ago. Then Lily, my oldest daughter, not the little one, she got sick. Fever took her in 3 days. She was 7 years old." "I'm sorry," Yates said, the words inadequate. "Your son?" she asked quietly. "Wrong place, wrong time. Bullet meant for someone else." He clenched his jaw. "His wife died in childbirth. He was raising those 3 alone, doing a good job of it. Then one damn fool in a saloon gets drunk and angry, and now—" He stopped, unable to continue. Hannah reached across the table and briefly touched his hand, a gesture of shared understanding. They'd both lost too much. They both knew what it was to keep moving forward when everything in you wanted to stop. "It's hard doing it alone," she said. "Yes," Yates agreed. "It surely is." When it came time to leave, the children protested. They'd had fun together, had forgotten their grief for a few hours. Yates understood the feeling. He'd forgotten his own burdens while working beside Hannah, focusing on something concrete and fixable. "Perhaps we could do this again," Hannah suggested. "The children enjoyed it, and I—" She hesitated. "I could use help with some other repairs. I can't pay much, but I could trade labor or food or—" "I'm not asking for payment," Yates interrupted. "Neighbors help neighbors. That's how it works out here." Hannah smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less burdened. "Then yes, I would appreciate the help." They arranged for Yates to return in a few days. On the ride home, Michael sat beside him on the wagon seat instead of in the back. "James says his mother teaches them reading and writing every morning," Michael said. "Did you know that?" "No, I didn't," Yates replied. He can read a whole book, and Margaret can too. Even Lily knows her letters. Yates felt a stab of guilt. He'd been so focused on basic survival that he hadn't thought about education. Thomas had been teaching Michael before he died, but that had stopped. "Would you like to learn more reading and writing?" "Yes, sir," Michael said quietly. "And I think Samuel should learn too. And Catherine when she's bigger." "You're right," Yates said. "I'll figure something out." But he wasn't sure what. He could read and do figures well enough for ranch work, but teaching was different. Maybe there was a school teacher in Lone Pine, though he'd have to pay. Money he had, but time to transport the children back and forth he didn't. When he returned to the Hayes farm 3 days later, he mentioned the problem to Hannah while they worked on repairing a section of her barn roof. "I could teach them," she offered. "I taught school for 2 years before I married. My children have lessons every morning anyway. 3 more wouldn't make much difference." Yates paused in hammering a nail. "That's a generous offer, but I can't ask you to take that on." "You're not asking, I'm offering. And it would be good for my children to have classmates." She smiled slightly. "Even a class of 6 is larger than a class of 3. "What would you want in trade?" Yates asked. He wouldn't take charity, even well-intentioned. Hannah considered. "I need help with things I can't manage alone. Heavy repairs, preparing the fields for winter, probably fixing things I don't even know are broken yet. If you could come by once or twice a week to work and let the children stay for lessons those days, that would be trade enough." It made sense. More than that, it felt right. The children would benefit, both from the education and from time together. And Yates would be helping a neighbor while ensuring his grandchildren got proper schooling. "All right," he agreed. "We'll try it." That was how the arrangement began. Twice a week, Yates would bring Michael, Samuel, and Catherine to the Hayes farm early in the morning. Hannah would teach the older children while Lily and Catherine played under Margaret's supervision. Yates would work on whatever needed fixing, and there was always something. Then they'd all have lunch together before heading home. The routine was good for everyone. The children thrived, learning and playing together. Michael started smiling again, tentative at first but real. Samuel's nightmares decreased. Catherine bonded with Lily, the 2 toddlers becoming inseparable during their play sessions. And Yates found himself looking forward to those days in a way that surprised him. Part of it was the satisfaction of good work accomplished. Hannah's farm was taking shape under their combined efforts, fences mended, roof patched, the well repaired. But more than that, he enjoyed Hannah's company. She was smart and capable, with a dry sense of humor that emerged once she relaxed around him. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs, falling into an easy rhythm. He tried not to think too much about how he watched for her smile, or how his chest warmed when she laughed at something he said. October brought cooler temperatures and the first real threat of frost. Yates helped Hannah prepare her fields and garden for winter, showing her techniques for protecting vulnerable plants. She proved a quick learner, asking intelligent questions and remembering everything he taught her. One afternoon, as they worked together building a cold frame for her winter vegetables, Hannah suddenly stopped and looked at him. "Can I ask you something personal?" Yates glanced up from measuring a board. "I suppose. Do you ever feel guilty?" She spoke quietly, carefully. "For having moments when you're not sad, when you forget, just for a little while, what you've lost?" He set down his tools and considered the question. "Yes," he admitted. "Sometimes I catch myself laughing at something one of the kids said, or enjoying a good meal, and I think, how can I be happy when Thomas is dead? When those children don't have their father?" "Yes," Hannah breathed. "Exactly that. Martin's been gone 5 months, Lily even less, And sometimes I'll be working or teaching the children, and I'll realize I haven't thought about them for an hour. And then I feel terrible, like I'm betraying their memory by moving forward. I don't think it works that way, Yates said slowly, working through the thought as he spoke. I think they'd want us to keep living, to find joy where we can. The grief doesn't go away, but maybe we're allowed to feel other things alongside it. Maybe, Hannah said. She met his eyes, and something passed between them: recognition, understanding, a connection deeper than shared loss. Then she looked away quickly. We should finish this before the light fails. They worked in companionable silence, but Yates felt the shift between them. Something had changed, or perhaps something had been acknowledged that had been growing for weeks. As autumn deepened, Yates found himself volunteering to help with more and more tasks at Hannah's farm. He told himself it was practical, she needed the assistance, and the children benefited from time together. But he knew it was more than that. He looked for excuses to ride over, to see Hannah's face light up when he arrived, to work beside her and talk about everything and nothing. George, his ranch hand, noticed. "You're spending a lot of time at the Hayes place," he commented one morning as they rode out to move cattle. "She needs help," Yates replied defensively. "Didn't say otherwise," George said mildly. "Just making an observation. She seems like a good woman." "She is," Yates agreed. George was quiet for a moment, then added, "Your son's been gone 3 months now. That's not a long time, but it's also not nothing. No shame in finding comfort where you can." "It's not like that," Yates protested. "Isn't it?" George asked. "Or isn't it yet?" Yates didn't answer because he couldn't. The truth was complicated and frightening. Yes, he was drawn to Hannah. Yes, he thought about her more than was strictly proper. But his son had died less than 4 months ago. Was it wrong to feel something for another woman? Was it too soon? What would people think? What would the children think? The questions plagued him as November arrived with sharp winds and occasional rain. The land turned brown and dormant, hunkering down for winter. Yates and Hannah worked to ensure both properties were prepared, firewood stacked, animals secured, supplies laid in. One cold afternoon, they'd finished reinforcing Hannah's chicken coop against predators and winter weather. The children were inside doing lessons, with Margaret supervising the younger ones. Hannah had coffee heating on the stove, and they stood in the kitchen warming their hands around the cups. "I couldn't have managed this without you," Hannah said. "The farm would have fallen apart by now." "You're stronger than you think," Yates replied. "You'd have found a way." "Maybe, but it would have been a lot harder and lonelier." She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You've been a good friend, Yates, friend." The word felt both accurate and insufficient. "You've been a help to me too. With the children, teaching them, letting them play with yours, it's made a difference. They're good children, all of them. They've been through so much, but they're resilient." "Like their mothers," Yates said. Hannah smiled, but sadness lingered in her eyes. "I'm not their mother." "I'm sure they remember her, at least the older ones do." "I meant you and their grandmother," Yates said. "But you've been mothering them these past months, whether you claim the title or not. Samuel asks for you when he has a bad dream now. Catherine calls you Miss Hannah and runs to you when she falls down. And your grandchildren have brought life back to this house," Hannah replied. James laughs again. "Margaret plays instead of just working. Even little Lily seems lighter." They looked at each other across the kitchen, the air between them charged with unspoken things. Yates wanted to close the distance, to take her hand, to say what he was feeling. But fear held him back, fear of rejection, of moving too fast, of betraying his son's memory. Hannah looked away first. "I should check on the children." The moment passed, but it left something behind: possibility, potential, the promise of more if they were both brave enough to reach for it. Winter settled over the Owens Valley in earnest as December began. The Sierra Nevada peaks to the west, wore heavy snow, brilliant white against blue skies. The ranch and farm kept them busy with daily tasks, feeding animals, breaking ice on water troughs, maintaining buildings against the cold. Yates continued his twice-weekly visits, though sometimes he made additional trips if Hannah needed something. He told himself it was neighborly concern, but he knew better. He craved her company, the sound of her voice, the way she pushed a stray hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The children had fully integrated, treating each other as extended family. Michael and James were inseparable, teaching each other skills: ranch work from Michael, book learning from James. Samuel and Margaret had formed a bond based on shared gentleness, both of them sensitive souls who preferred helping the younger children to rougher play. And Catherine and Lily were like twins despite their age difference, always together, always giggling. It was starting to feel like one large family instead of two separate grieving units. The realization both comforted and terrified Yates. 2 weeks before Christmas, a heavy storm rolled in, bringing rain that turned to sleet. Yates had planned to visit that day but postponed, not wanting to risk the children in dangerous weather. By the second day, he was restless and worried. Was Hannah all right? Did she have enough firewood? Was her roof holding against the rain? On the third day, the storm broke enough for travel. Yates loaded the children into the wagon, bundled against the cold, and headed east. The roads were muddy, the going slow, but he pushed on. Hannah's farm looked intact from a distance, but as they drew closer, Yates saw water pooling near the barn. He pulled up to the house and Hannah emerged, wrapped in a shawl. "Yates, you shouldn't have come in this weather," she said, but her relief was evident. "Wanted to make sure you were all right," he said, climbing down. "Looks like you might have some flooding in the barn." "The drainage ditch overflowed," Hannah explained. "I've been trying to redirect it, but—" She gestured helplessly at the water. "Let's take a look," Yates said. He spent the next several hours digging new channels to divert the water away from the buildings. It was cold, muddy work, but necessary. Hannah worked alongside him despite his protests that she should stay dry. Together they managed to redirect the worst of it, saving the barn from serious water damage. By the time they finished, they were both soaked and shivering. Hannah insisted he come inside to warm up before attempting the ride home. She heated water for washing and put coffee on to boil. The children were playing quietly by the fire, all 6 of them huddled together under blankets. Hannah disappeared into her bedroom and emerged with some clothes. "These were Martin's. They'll be big on you, but they're dry." Yates changed in the back room, grateful for the dry fabric even if the pants were short and the shirt loose. When he returned to the kitchen, Hannah had also changed into dry clothes, her hair loose and drying by the fire. She looked younger with her hair down, softer somehow. She poured coffee and they sat at the table, both warming their hands on the cups. Outside, rain pattered against the windows. "Thank you," Hannah said. "Again, I seem to be saying that a lot lately." "You do the same for me," Yates replied. "Would I have the chance?" Hannah asked. "You never seem to need help." "Everyone needs help sometimes," Yates said. "I'm just better at hiding it, maybe." Hannah studied him thoughtfully. "What do you need, Yates?" The question, asked so directly, caught him off guard. What did he need? The honest answer was sitting across from him, but he couldn't say that. Could he? He stopped, started again. I need to know I'm doing right by those children. I need to not feel like I'm failing Thomas every day. He swallowed hard. I need to not be alone in this. You're not alone, Hannah said softly. I'm here. Their eyes met and held. Yates felt his heart pound in his chest. Hannah, a crash from the other room interrupted. They both jumped up to find that Catherine had knocked over a stack of books. No real harm done, but the moment was broken. Later, as they prepared to leave, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. Hannah walked them to the wagon, her shawl wrapped tight against the cold. "Will you come for Christmas?" she asked suddenly. "All of you. I was going to cook a chicken and make a cake. It would be nice to have company." "We'd like that," Yates said. "I'll bring venison. Shot a deer last week." "It's a plan then," Hannah said, smiling. On Christmas Day, Yates and the children arrived at the Hayes farm laden with food and small gifts. He'd carved wooden animals for each child, spending his evenings by lamplight with knife and wood. For Hannah, he'd bought fabric in town, a beautiful deep blue that matched her eyes. Hannah had baked bread and a cake with precious sugar and made gifts for everyone, knitted scarves in different colors, each one perfectly sized. For Yates, she'd made a new shirt from fabric she'd traded eggs for in town. They cooked together, filling the house with warmth and wonderful smells. The children played with their new toys, chattering excitedly. It felt like a real Christmas, full of life and joy, so different from what Yates had imagined months ago standing by his son's grave. After dinner, they sat by the fire while the children acted out the nativity story with their wooden animals serving as improvised characters. Hannah laughed at their creativity, and Yates found himself watching her face, memorizing the curve of her smile, the light in her eyes. When it was time to put the younger children to bed, they made pallets on the floor by the fire. Catherine and Lily curled up together, already fast friends. Samuel nestled between blankets, content and sleepy. Michael and James stayed up a bit longer, reading by lamplight. Yates and Hannah sat at the table with coffee, the house quiet around them. "This was a good day," Hannah said. "It was," Yates agreed. "Thank you for inviting us." "I didn't want to be alone," Hannah admitted. "Last Christmas Martin was alive, Lily was here. I couldn't bear the thought of this year being just the three of us, remembering." "I understand," Yates said. "Thomas always brought the children over Christmas morning. We'd have breakfast together, exchange small gifts. I couldn't imagine facing that day without them, but also facing it knowing he wouldn't be there." "Do you think it gets easier?" Hannah asked. "The grief, I think it changes," Yates said carefully. "Becomes part of you instead of something separate. You learn to carry it." "Have you?" Hannah asked. "Learn to carry it, learning," Yates corrected. "And it's easier because of you, because of this." He gestured at the room, the sleeping children, the space they'd created together. "I don't know what to call what we're building here, but it helps." Hannah reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused from work, strong. "I know what to call it," she said quietly. "At least I think I do, but I'm afraid to say it." Yates turned his hand to clasp hers properly. "So am I," he admitted. "Afraid it's too soon. Afraid people will judge. Afraid of what the children will think. Afraid it might not be real," Hannah suggested. "Just two lonely people reaching for comfort." "Is that what you think it is?" Yates asked. "No," Hannah said firmly. "I think it's real. I think I've been falling in love with you since that first day you helped me in town. Or maybe since you showed up to fix my fence. Or maybe it was the day you taught Samuel to pet the chickens without being scared. I don't know when exactly, but I know what I feel." Yates's chest tightened with emotion. "I think about you all the time," he confessed. "I look for excuses to come here. I lie awake at night wondering if you feel the same way I do, and then I feel guilty because Thomas has only been gone a few months." "What kind of man falls in love that fast after losing his son? The kind who's still alive," Hannah said gently. "The kind who has children to raise and a life to live. Thomas wouldn't want you to stop living, would he?" "No," Yates admitted. "He'd want the children cared for. He'd want me to be happy." "Martin would want the same for me," Hannah said, "and for our children. They need stability, love, a complete family if possible." "Is that what this would be?" Yates asked. "A practical arrangement for the children's sake?" It would be that, Hannah said. But it would also be more. It would be two people who understand each other, who work well together, who care for each other. Maybe that's not the passionate romance of youth, but maybe it's something better, something real and lasting. Yates stood and moved around the table, still holding her hand. He knelt beside her chair so their eyes were level. I do care for you, Hannah, more than I know how to say. You've brought light back into my life when I thought everything would be dark forever. If you'll have me, if you'll have all of us, I'd like to make this official. A real family, not just neighbors helping each other. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Are you asking me to marry you, Yates Ingram? I am, Yates said. I know it's fast and people might talk, but I don't care about that. I care about you and those children, all of them. I want to wake up every morning knowing we're facing the day together. I want to build a life with you, Hannah. Will you marry me? Yes, Hannah said, tears spilling over. Yes, I'll marry you. Yates stood and pulled her up into his arms, holding her close. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her arms wrapped around his waist. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, letting the promise of the future settle over them. When they finally pulled apart, Hannah was laughing through her tears. The children will be thrilled. They've been scheming to keep us together, you know. Have they? Yates asked, amused. Oh yes, James mentioned just yesterday that it would be convenient if we all lived in one house. Michael agreed immediately. Smart children, Yates said. Takes after their grandmother. Hannah smiled at the implied compliment, then grew serious. People will talk, though. We should be prepared for that. Let them talk, Yates said firmly. We know the truth. We're two people who found each other in difficult circumstances and built something good. That's nothing to be ashamed of. They talked late into the night, planning their future. They decided Yates's ranch made more sense as a home. It was larger, better established, could support them all more easily. Hannah would sell her farm or possibly rent it out, using the money to expand the ranch operations. They'd marry in the spring, giving them time to prepare and allowing a decent interval after their losses. In the meantime, they'd continue as they had been, but with the understanding that they were building towards something permanent. The winter passed quickly after that. Yates found himself whistling while he worked, looking forward to each day with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. The children were told of the engagement and reacted with uncomplicated joy. To them, it simply meant their favorite people would all be together permanently, which was exactly what they wanted. Hannah began preparing to move, sorting through possessions, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. It was bittersweet, saying goodbye to the home she'd shared with Martin, but she was ready. The farm held too many sad memories. The ranch offered a fresh start. They married on a bright day in late March 1879, 7 months after Thomas's death and 10 months after Martin's passing. The ceremony was simple, held at the small church in Lone Pine with just a few friends and neighbors present. Hannah wore a new dress she'd sewn herself in a soft gray, appropriate for a widow remarrying. Yates wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed. The children stood with them, all 6 lined up as witnesses to the union that made them officially one family. Michael held Catherine, who kept trying to grab at Hannah's skirt. James stood straight and proud beside his mother. Samuel held Margaret's hand while little Lily clutched a bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Hannah gently, aware of the children watching. Her eyes shone with happiness and promise. The reception was held at the ranch, which Hannah had seen many times but now entered as its mistress. Neighbors had contributed food and well wishes, though Yates noted some disapproving looks from the more conservative members of the community. He ignored them. Their opinions didn't matter. That night, after the children were finally settled in their rooms, Michael and James in one, Samuel in another, the three girls sharing the largest bedroom, Yates and Hannah stood together on the porch looking out at the dark land. "Are you happy?" Yates asked, his arm around her waist. "I am," Hannah said. "I didn't think I would be again, but I am." "Neither did I," Yates admitted. "After Thomas died, I couldn't imagine anything but grief and struggle, but you changed that." "We changed it," Hannah corrected. "Together." They went inside to begin their life as husband and wife, both grateful for the second chance they'd been given. The first year of marriage brought adjustments as they learned to blend their families and lives completely. There were challenges, disagreements about child rearing, about money, about how to run the ranch. But they worked through each issue with patience and mutual respect, remembering that they were partners in this. The children adapted beautifully. Michael and James became true brothers, working the ranch alongside Yates and learning everything he could teach them. Samuel came out of his shell under Margaret's gentle friendship, discovering a love of animals that made him invaluable in caring for the horses and cattle. The three girls, Catherine, Lily, and Margaret, formed an inseparable trio, Margaret naturally taking on the role of big sister to the younger two. Hannah proved as capable at ranch management as she'd been at farming, keeping the books, managing supplies, and making decisions alongside Yates. They expanded operations, buying more cattle and breeding better horses. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. By their first anniversary, they'd established a comfortable routine and deep partnership. They'd also fallen more deeply in love, the fondness and respect of their courtship deepening into genuine passion and devotion. One evening in early spring 1880, Hannah had something to tell Yates. They were sitting on the porch after supper, watching the children play in the yard. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I'm carrying," she said simply. Yates felt a surge of emotion, joy, fear, wonder. "Are you sure?" "Very sure. I've been through this enough times to know." She smiled at his expression. "Are you happy about it?" "I am," Yates said, pulling her close. "Scared too, but happy. We'll have a child that's ours together, part of both of us." "The others will always be ours too," Hannah said firmly. "But yes, this baby will be special in its own way." They told the children at supper the next night. The reactions were mixed but mostly positive. Michael, at nearly 8, thought he was too old for babies but admitted it might be nice. James was curious about whether it would be a boy or girl. Samuel worried that a baby would cry at night, but was reassured when Hannah promised it would stay in their room. The girls were unanimously thrilled, already planning how they'd help care for their new sibling. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and summer. Hannah continued working as long as she was able, then transitioned to lighter tasks as her belly grew. Yates was alternately protective and amazed, watching this woman he loved carry their child. In October 1880, on a cool morning with the first hint of winter in the air, Hannah went into labor. The local midwife was summoned, and Yates was banished to wait anxiously with the children. The hours dragged by, every cry from the bedroom making his heart race with fear. Finally, the midwife emerged with a smile. "You have a healthy son, Mr. Ingram, and your wife is doing well." Relief flooded through Yates. He entered the bedroom to find Hannah propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She smiled at him and he sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "Meet your son," she said, placing the baby in his arms. Yates looked down at the small face, red and wrinkled and perfect. He felt tears prick his eyes. A son, his and Hannah's son, living proof of their love and their second chance. "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. They discussed names but hadn't decided. Yates thought about his son Thomas, about Hannah's husband Martin, about all they'd lost and all they'd gained. "Thomas Martin," Yates said, "after both of them, so we never forget where we came from, but also as a promise to keep moving forward." "Thomas Martin Ingram," Hannah said, trying it out. "Tommy for short. I love it." The children were allowed in to meet their new brother, all six clustering around the bed in various states of awe and excitement. Catherine and Lily wanted to touch his tiny hands. Samuel worried he was too fragile. Margaret promised to help with everything. Michael and James just stared, seeming unsure what to make of this squalling creature. "He's our brother," James said finally, wonderingly. "All of ours." "Yes," Hannah said, "all of ours." Life with a baby brought new challenges and joys. Sleepless nights and endless feedings, but also first smiles and the miracle of watching a new person develop. The older children helped as they'd promised, the girls especially taking turns entertaining Tommy when Hannah needed to work. Yates found himself marveling at how full his life had become. 2 years ago, he'd been standing by his son's grave wondering how he'd survive. Now he had a wife he loved deeply, 6 children he was raising, and a new baby son. The ranch was thriving, the family was happy, and he'd found peace with his grief. Thomas would always be missed, but Yates had learned to carry that loss alongside his joy, 2 truths coexisting. Hannah felt the same. Martin and her Lily were gone but not forgotten, their memories honored in the life she'd built with Yates. She'd found happiness again, found love, found purpose in this blended family they'd created from loss and hope. As Tommy grew from infant to toddler, the family continued to flourish. The older children were maturing into capable young people. Michael, at 10, could work the ranch nearly as well as an adult. James, at 11, was talking about becoming a lawyer someday, his love of books pointing him toward education. Samuel discovered a gift with horses, able to gentle even the most fractious animal. Margaret was learning to be a teacher like her mother, often helping the younger children with their lessons. And Catherine and Lily remained constant companions, wild and laughing, bringing constant energy to the household. In 1882, Hannah became pregnant again. This time, Yates knew what to expect and was calmer, though no less devoted to ensuring her comfort and safety. Their second child together was born in June, a daughter with Hannah's dark hair and Yates's gray eyes. "What about Ruth?" Hannah suggested, cradling the baby. "After my grandmother. She was strong and kind, survived losing everything twice over." "Ruth Ingram," Yates said. "It's perfect." With 2 babies and 6 older children, the house was chaos and noise and wonderful. They'd expanded the ranch house over the years, adding rooms to accommodate everyone. What had once been a bachelor's modest dwelling was now a sprawling family home full of life. Yates stood on the porch one evening in the summer of 1883, watching his family. Michael and James were teaching Samuel to rope a fence post. Margaret had Catherine, Lily, and Tommy helping her in the garden, though they were mostly just digging in the dirt. Hannah sat in a rocking chair with baby Ruth, nursing her while humming softly. It was an ordinary moment, nothing special, but Yates felt his chest tighten with overwhelming gratitude. He'd been given a second chance at family, at love, at life itself. He'd taken it, despite his fears, despite his grief, and it had led to this, to fullness and purpose and bone-deep contentment. Hannah looked up and caught his eye. She smiled, that same smile that had caught his attention years ago, now deepened with shared history and abiding love. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Yates moved to sit beside her, taking her free hand. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am, how grateful." "We both are," Hannah said. "We found each other when we most needed it, and we built something beautiful." "We did," Yates agreed, "and we're not done yet." As the years continued to unfold, their family remained their greatest joy and achievement. They weathered the usual storms: sickness, financial pressures, the challenges of raising 8 children with different needs and personalities. But they faced everything together, united in purpose and love. Michael grew up to take over major portions of ranch operations, eventually marrying a sweet-natured girl from Lone Pine and building a house on the far corner of the property. James did become a lawyer, studying in San Francisco but returning to Lone Pine to practice, serving his community with the same dedication his mother had once brought to teaching. Samuel married young and started his own horse breeding operation, becoming known throughout California for his skill. Margaret became a teacher as expected, opening a proper school in Lone Pine and educating 2 generations of children. Catherine and Lily, inseparable since toddlerhood, shocked no one when they married brothers and built neighboring houses, continuing their lifelong friendship into their adult lives. Tommy grew into a capable rancher like his father and half-brother, eventually taking over full management of the property. And Ruth, the baby, became a doctor, one of the first female physicians in California, driven by having watched the local midwife save her mother's life and countless others. Through it all, Yates and Hannah remained the center, the foundation on which their family was built. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched their children grow and thrive, welcomed grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. On a warm evening in the spring of 1905, Yates and Hannah sat on the porch of the ranch house they'd shared for 26 years. Both were in their 60s now, faces lined, hair gray, bodies slower than they once were. But they still sat close together, still held hands, still looked at each other with the same affection they'd felt when they were younger. "You ever think about that first day?" Hannah asked. "When you helped me in Peterson's store?" "All the time," Yates admitted. "I think about how close we came to never really knowing each other. If I hadn't spoken up that day, if you hadn't needed fence repairs, if we'd been too afraid or proud to accept help." "But we weren't," Hannah said. "We took the chances we were offered and look what came of it." 8 children, 16 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren so far, Yates listed. A successful ranch, a good life, and 26 years of marriage. Plus the months of courtship before that, Hannah added with a smile. "Don't forget those." "I could never forget," Yates said. Every moment led us here. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the Sierra Nevada peaks in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, they could see Michael's house, lights coming on as evening fell. Closer to the main house, Tommy was closing up the barn for the night, Ruth's teenage son helping him. Their family, their legacy, all around them. "I grieved my son," Yates said quietly. "I still do some days, but I also found joy again, found love, found purpose." "I grieved my daughter and my husband," Hannah replied, "and I found the same things. We gave those children, all of them, a family again. We gave each other a second chance." "Best decision I ever made," Yates said. "Asking you to marry me that Christmas night." "Best decision I ever made was saying yes," Hannah agreed. They sat together as darkness fell, surrounded by the life they'd built from loss and love. It hadn't been easy, blending their families, building trust, learning to love again while carrying grief. But they'd done it together, and that had made all the difference. The ranch would continue after they were gone, passed down through generations. Their children would carry forward the lessons they'd learned about resilience, about love, about the importance of family. The story of how Yates and Hannah found each other, how they raised 8 children together, how they built something lasting from the ashes of tragedy, would be told and retold, a family legend of hope and second chances. But for now, they were simply two people who'd loved and loved again, sitting together at the end of a long day, grateful for every moment they'd been given. The Wild West had been hard and often cruel, but it had also brought them together, and for that they would be forever thankful. Inside the house, they could hear voices: Tommy's wife calling everyone to dinner, grandchildren laughing, the normal sounds of family life. Yates and Hannah stood, still holding hands after all these years, and walked inside together to join the family they'd created. Their story wasn't about forgetting the past or replacing what they'd lost. It was about honoring those memories while choosing to live fully in the present, to love again, to find joy in unexpected places. They'd grieved their losses and they'd raised their children, all of them, biological and inherited, each one loved equally. They'd built a life that encompassed both sorrow and happiness, loss and gain, endings and new beginnings. And they'd done it together, proving that even in the harsh landscape of the American West in the late 1800s, love could bloom from unlikely soil, and families could be made and remade through dedication, compassion, and hope. As they sat down to dinner surrounded by their family, Yates caught Hannah's eye across the crowded table. She smiled at him, the same smile that had warmed his heart for nearly 3 decades, and he smiled back. Whatever else life had brought them, hardship, loss, challenge, it had also brought them this: a table full of loved ones, a home built on shared values and mutual respect, and a partnership that had weathered every storm. The Wild West had taken much from both of them, but it had also given them each other, and that had been enough to build everything else upon. Their love story hadn't been conventional or easy, but it had been real, lasting, and ultimately triumphant, a testament to the human capacity for resilience, growth, and the courage to love again even after devastating loss. And so their story ended not with an ending at all, but with continuation, with children and grandchildren carrying forward their legacy, with love passed down through generations, with the ranch continuing to thrive under family stewardship. Yates and Hannah had taken their grief and their losses and transformed them into something beautiful and enduring. They'd raised their children together, all 8 of them, and in doing so had created not just a family but a foundation that would last long after they were gone. Years later, when both had passed peacefully in their old age, their children would gather to remember them. They'd tell stories about their grandfather who'd lost his son but found the strength to love again, and their grandmother or stepmother who'd held fast to her farm and her dignity until the right man came along. They'd talk about how 2 grieving people had come together and built something neither could have created alone. And in the evening, as the family dispersed to their various homes scattered across the valley, they'd look at the old ranch house and remember the love that had built it, the family that had filled it, and the legacy of second chances that continued to inspire them all. The Wild West had been a place of danger and hardship, but for Yates Ingram and Hannah Hayes, it had also been a place of redemption, renewal, and a love story that proved grief and joy could coexist, that families could be rebuilt, and that it was never too late for a new beginning. Their names were carved on a shared headstone in the Lone Pine Cemetery, their resting place overlooking the valley they'd loved and the mountains that had witnessed their lives. But their true memorial was the family they'd created, the love they'd shared, and the example they'd set for choosing hope over despair, love over loneliness, and life over mere survival. In the end, that was the greatest legacy anyone could leave, proof that even in the hardest times, in the wildest places, love could flourish and families could heal.